Hi there, I'm Mr. Saare, and I'm applying to teach online with Veritas Scholars Academy. Happy New Year! Today is January the 1st, 2026. For this presentation, I will teach you how to accent Latin words correctly with a proper classical pronunciation. I only have 5 to 6 minutes to do this presentation, so let's get started. Simply put, there are 3 rules that you need to learn in order to accent Latin words correctly. The first rule pertains to words of only 1 syllable. The second rule pertains to words of 2 syllables. The third and final rule pertains to Latin words of 3 or more syllables. So if there are 4, 5, 6, or even more syllables, those words will all depend on the same third rule that you're about to learn. Now, before I get into the rules, I need to point out an assumption that I'm making for this lesson, and that is that you, the student, already know basic principles of syllabification and syllable length. Knowledge of these is prerequisite for proper accentuation. Again, you've got to know these matters before you can move on with knowing how to stress the right syllables in Latin words. All right, so let's now get into the first rule, which pertains to words of only 1 syllable. And the wonderful news is, it's a no-brainer. It really is simple because you only have 1 syllable in a word to work with. So that is the only syllable that can be accented, that can be stressed, okay? And so look at the first example here. We have non, and simply the accent falls on the long O appearing in the word. So the O there with the macron, and you'll see the accent above that. And the next word, the conjunction et, likewise will be stressed as et. And then finally, the word sunt, that verb, will be simply accented as sunt. Moving on to the next rule, which pertains to words of 2 syllables, the rule is just as easy. You simply have to stress the first syllable of the 2-syllable word. So for example, in the first row, we have amo, and the stress will fall on the first syllable, which is the letter A, amo, not amo. That would be wrong, but amo. The next example with arma, again, stress that first syllable of arma. And then lastly, the verb here, laudas, will be emphasized as laudas. You will stress that first syllable. That is the accent. It is not laudas, rather it is laudas. Again, for this rule, you only have to stress the first syllable of a 2-syllable word. All right, now the final rule that we get to, which is the rule for words of 3 or more syllables. The key is you're going to have to look at the penult, okay? You got to look at that second to the last syllable of the word and analyze it in order to figure out where you're going to place the accent. If the penult is long, you will simply accent that penult. But if it is short, then you're going to have to accent the antepenult, okay? And you can diagram this rule out, and this will make it even easier to keep in memory what the rule is. Imagine, if you will, that these 3 dashes here represent the final 3 syllables of a word. Again, we're working with words of 3 or more syllables, okay? But we're only interested in the final 3 syllables, and we can label them as such. We've got the antepenult, the penult, and then the ultima. Of course, the ultima is the last syllable of the word. The second to last syllable is called the penult, and the third to last syllable we call the antepenult. When that penult is long, either long by nature or position, you will put the accent, you will stress that syllable. The accent goes above the penult. That is the syllable that you will stress. If the penult is long, then you will stress that syllable. If it is short, then you will move the accent over to stand above the antepenult. That is the syllable that you will stress in pronunciation. Now, for a helpful comparison, take a look at what this looks like when they are right next to each other, these 2 diagrams. When the penult is long, you have that syllable accented. When the penult is short, the accent will stand on the antepenult. That's the syllable that will be stressed. So let's practice the rule. With this word right here, monetis. First thing we want to do is to divide it up into the syllables. and we will see that there are actually 3 syllables. Okay, so we're going to deal with that third rule for words of 3 or more syllables. And now we can add it onto the diagram, and we have to watch carefully with what's happening there with the penult. And you will notice that it is long, therefore that will get the accent, monetis. And here it is circled now so that you will know which syllable is being stressed. Let's look at another example. This time we will use the feminine name Amelia. We see that there are 4 syllables, and when we add these syllables onto the diagram, we discover that the penult is short, therefore the accent will fall on the antepenult. And there it is. I have circled it so that you can see it. It is pronounced Amelia, not Amelia, but Amelia. That is the correct pronunciation. Again, I'm Mr. Keith Saare. I'm applying to teach at Veritas Scholars Academy. The end. Thank you.